So thank you very much, Krishna Chandra Prabhu, for having us over, and very happy to see so many familiar faces. I see Suhad Prabhu. I think I saw Kadamakanna Prabhu. I may have seen Jagjiva Nitaipad Prabhu, Hare Krishna. I wish I was given the opportunity to be in New Zealand now physically. But I think we all have restrictions. But the beauty of Bhagavatam is that it transcends all these restrictions. Krishna Chandra Prabhu has very kindly given a wonderful opportunity to be part of the celebrations in Auckland concerning chanting, reading, and especially as it concerns Srila Prabhupada and his books. And today I'm happy to be part of that also. Perhaps in the next hour, I will try my best to share on what Srimad-Bhagavatam says about Srimad-Bhagavatam on its own glories. It is nicely stated in Shastras that when someone is very noble, actually nobody can actually praise his nobility, and his nobility comes out very naturally. Srimad-Bhagavatam is like that. Bhagavatam is so pure that only from Bhagavatam can we understand Bhagavatam's purity. This is a very important point for us to remember. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Narayanam Namaskritya Naram Chaiva Narottamam Devim Saraswatim Vyasam Tato Jayam Mudiraye. Nasta Prayeshu Abhadreshu Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya Bhagavati Uttama Shloke Bhaktir Bhavati Naishtiki. So these are the prayers that we pray very hard to from Bhagavatam 1-4 and 1-18 of Srimad-Bhagavatam. And these prayers are very important because they tell us that before we recite Bhagavatam, we should understand that Bhagavatam is the means of conquest. The only way to conquer anything difficult in this world is actually through Bhagavatam, because Bhagavatam is non-different from Krishna. And the other point that's very important is that when we regularly attend classes on the Srimad-Bhagavatam, and when we do that and we serve the pure devotees, then whatever that's troublesome to our heart, it is almost completely destroyed. So this is a very practical point. Therefore, being regular in our study of Bhagavatam is very important. Of course, the human mind is so rascal in tendency. Regular can mean once a year also, isn't it? If you say once a year I'm hearing Bhagavatam, that is also regular. But regular, you will see by the end of our time together, in one part of Bhagavatam, Prabhupada translates regular as always. He knows our mind, So he says regular means always. So if we always try to study Bhagavatam and do that, by sincerely attending these wonderful sessions of gathering to hear Bhagavatam, by doing that, actually we are rendering we are rendering service to the pure devotee. Why? Because Srimad-Bhagavatam has been given to us by Srila Prabhupada. And we cannot find someone purer in this world as a devotee than Prabhupada. And therefore, when we study his Srimad-Bhagavatam, actually we are rendering service to the pure devotee. So in 1-18, the actions may appear separate, but because this Bhagavatam is given to us by the mercy of Prabhupada, that two actions actually are subsumed in one. And that is the uniqueness of the Bhagavatam that has been given to us by Prabhupada. So Srimad-Bhagavatam is actually considered to be the Mahapuran. And sometimes, people say that Purana actually means mythology. But this is a wrong conception. And we should be very clear whenever we can to actually dispel it. It is said actually when, you have persons who are coming from the Vedic tradition or from some Vedic background, not even understanding that there is nothing mythical about Bhagavatam. Actually, this point is very nicely given by Srila Prabhupada himself in a purport in first canto, 6th chapter, I think the 11th verse, 1-6-11. Srila Prabhupada very emphatically says, Srimad-Bhagavatam is the repetition of history. It is a repetition of what? Not mythology, history. But this history happened hundreds and millions of years ago. So Prabhupada says only the most important factors of this history are picked up and recorded in this transcendental literature. This is very important. Therefore, you cannot study Bhagavatam in a linear way. You have to study Bhagavatam based on the fact that whatever that is deemed important by Krishna and the pure devotees is actually recorded in this transcendental literature. So if you were to approach it from that, what you think or what I think is a linear fashion, the whole time cycle of Vedic calculation is never linear. So how can Bhagavatam be linear? Because Bhagavatam is eternal. So please remember, whatever we study in Bhagavatam is actually historical, and it has been recorded for the benefit of all humanity. This is a very important point for us to remember. In Bhagavatam also, especially in the last, almost the last canto, in the 12th canto, 13th chapter, if you want to understand the glories of Bhagavatam, in that 13th chapter, very nice points are given about Bhagavatam. For example, in 12, 13, 15, Srimad-Bhagavatam is declared to be the essence of all Vedanta philosophy. Vedanta is already the essence of Vedas, isn't it? Because Vedanta means the end of the Vedas. And Bhagavatam is declared to be the essence of the Vedanta philosophy. And it is so nicely stated by Shukadeva Goswami to Parikshit Maharaj. If one who has felt the satisfaction from its nectarian mellow will never be attracted to any other literature. This is a very nice point. When we have started to study Bhagavatam, you'll find, that even if you put any other literature in front of us, somehow or another, Bhagavatam has captured our hearts. This is because it is actually the entire conclusion of the Vedanta also. Then the next verse after that, Shukadeva Goswami becomes more graphic. He says, just like the Ganga is the greatest of all rivers, Lord Achyuta is the supreme of all the deities, then he says Srimad-Bhagavatam is the greatest of all Puranas. So there are many Puranas, but Bhagavatam is the greatest. Now, why Bhagavatam is the greatest? In order to understand the glory of something, we must also understand its nature and its significance. That is how we come to understand something's glory. Glory is not a sentimental word. In fact, when you study the glories of devotees, how do you study the glories of devotees? How do you study the glories of Bhagavatam? You have to understand the nature of that, and you have to understand its significance and importance. And together you can understand its glories. That is how we understand the glories. So Bhagavatam is considered, like all other Puranas, to have 10 topics of interest. And that's why basically there are 10 major topics in Bhagavatam. And other Puranas also basically have about 10 topics in other Puranas if you study. But Bhagavatam is very unique because Acharyas will tell you that all the first 9 topics of Bhagavatam are specifically there to glorify the 10th topic, which is Ashraya, which is actually the shelter, the supreme shelter of Krishna. So unlike other topics of Purana where each of the topics in other Puranas are standalones, in Bhagavatam, they all are a flow because they all touch Krishna. They start from the lotus feet of Krishna and they go all the way to his lotus face. This is a very important point. And that is why Srila Prabhupada always told us to systematically study Srimad-Bhagavatam. He told us to study Bhagavatam from cover to cover. There is a reason for that. Because Bhagavatam makes us what we call qualified. As you study Bhagavatam systematically, Bhagavatam purifies and qualifies us. It's a very nice point. Bhagavatam purifies and qualifies us. So that by the time we come to the 10th canto, which Prabhupada cautioned us we should be very careful, because otherwise we will not be able to understand the true essence. By the time we come to the 10th canto, Bhagavatam has expertly prepared us to actually become qualified to hear and to receive Krishna as Ashraya. So therefore you can see, the entire Bhagavatam, unlike other Puranas where there are bits and pieces of topics, the entire Bhagavatam is centered around understanding, appreciating, and glorifying Krishna, either through Krishna himself or through the devotees of Krishna. And the premise for this is, of course, in the first note, the second Chatushloka of Srimad-Bhagavatam, second canto, 9th chapter, 34th verse. Rite ritam yad pratiyeta, na pratiyeta chatmani, tad vidya atmano mayan, yatha bhaso yatha tamaha. Krishna tells to Brahma very nicely this point. Brahma, if there's anything in this world that appears to be of value, that's very nice. But if it has no relation to me, then actually it has no reality. If we can just learn this from Bhagavatam, our lives will become very peaceful. Because there's so many things, Prabhus and Matajis, that appear to be valuable, isn't it? In this world, so many things around us are valuable. But if that thing which is valuable cannot be actually used for Krishna, then Krishna is saying very clearly here, it has no value. So this is how we define value as devotees in our lives. Whether it is the house, it is a laptop, if it can be used for Krishna, it has value. Otherwise, you can have something very great, but if it is not used for Krishna, actually by Vedic and Bhagavatam's conclusion, it has no value. So nice. It's a very nice point. Therefore, the intrinsic nature of Bhagavatam is that one, it exists eternally. Two, Bhagavatam exists to always serve Krishna. And that is the greatest message for us, that we must live to the best that we can to serve Krishna. This is very important. Tava katha amritam tapta jivanam kavi biriditam kalmasapaham Shravanamangalam Srimad-Bhagavatam bhuvi granantiye burida janaha. The gopis sing this essence of the nature of Bhagavatam. They say that this katha is amrita. That's why it is katha amrita. This katha that is in Bhagavatam, it is nectarian. It is so sweet. If you go to a shop and you like a sweet, if it's really sweet, nobody has to ask you to come back. You will come back, isn't it? You will come back. Money or no money, you still come back. But if something has no sweet, then even if they pay you money, you will not come back. So Bhagavatam is like that. Bhagavatam is so sweet, the gopis say, that it is katha, but it is nectarian, amrit. But more important than that is what the gopis say. They use the word tapta jivanam. Tapta jivanam means Bhagavatam, the topics of Krishna are the life and soul of the gopis. That is the nature of Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam sustains its devotees. It's a very important nature of Bhagavatam. The reason why we're all so happy sitting down to hear Bhagavatam is because it sustains our happiness. Do you know, in this nature, in this material world, it's very difficult to sustain happiness. Happiness comes for a while, fleeting, and then it'll go, isn't it? I remember I was very happy when exams were finished, but I became completely anxious 1 week before exams. So when I was very young and I started chanting, my mother used to know when exams were going on and when exams finished based on how much desperation I was putting into chanting. When I was chanting very hard before exam, she knew exam was coming. After the exam finished, I took a holiday from Bhakti. She knew exams were finished. Suddenly she saw me chanting very diligently. She knew now results are coming out. So happiness in material world is up and down. We feel happy for a while, anxious, happy for a while, anxious. But happiness when we are connected to Bhagavatam is eternal, because the intrinsic nature of Bhagavatam is the intrinsic nature of the Lord. And therefore, all the qualities of the Lord are found in Bhagavatam. If you want to find 64 transcendental qualities of Krishna, you will find 64 transcendental qualities of Krishna in Bhagavatam. You'll find it. You'll find it because it is non-different from Krishna. Now, important to us about this glory is the glorious nature in which Bhagavatam has been revealed. This is a very nice point. Bhagavatam actually was revealed when Brahma, right, became the first living being in this world. And it was to Brahma that the Supreme Personality of Godhead first revealed Bhagavatam in this material universe. And actually, when it was revealed to Brahma, it was revealed in the form of 4 seed verses. And from those Chatushlokas, whole Bhagavatam has come. And how Bhagavatam was revealed is very important. Because when Brahma was first born, he was sitting on a lotus flower, all alone in a darkened world. There was no light, there was no understanding of where he had come from. So he dived into the lotus stem from where he came, hoping with his own effort, he could understand his origin. But after such a long time, he was actually baffled. And when he came back, he decided to look within and pray to the source of who he is. And as he started praying to that source of all sources, as he started praying to Paramparayanam, who is the shelter of all shelters, Then he heard the word tapa, tapa, tapa. And then he could understand that actually he was supposed to begin his spiritual life with some austerity and penance. And that is the beauty of penance and austerity in devotional life. Because in devotional life, if we do not have austerity and penance to approach Bhagavatam, we will find that Bhagavatam seems to be elusive to us. What are you all doing now? You're all putting some austerity and penance. You are nicely tolerating me, and you're sitting down with austerity to hear Bhagavatam. This austerity pleases Krishna very much. And Brahma did that. And the result was that Krishna revealed to the Srimad-Bhagavatam to Brahma in 4 seed verses. And the beauty is, when the Lord did appear, and after he chanted all 4 beautiful verses, the Lord also reminded Brahma of something very important, which we must remind ourselves of when we study Bhagavatam, even when we perform devotional service. In the 3rd canto, 9th chapter, 38th verse, Brahmaji says something really, Lord Krishna says something very nice to Brahma. Yat chakartanda mat stotram, mat katha abhu dayantikam, yad va tapasi te nishta, nishta means faith, sa esha mat anugraha, anugraha means my mercy. So now he says something very nice. Brahma, whatever prayers you have chanted that praise me very nicely, whatever prayers you have done that praise the glories of my transcendental activities, whatever penances that you have done and undertaken to understand me, and your firm nishta, your firm faith in me, all of this, Brahma, please know one thing, they are considered to be my causeless mercy. This is an amazing, astonishing revelation. Sometimes we think I'm the one chanting, I'm the one waking up chanting, doing Mangala Arati, I'm putting in effort, I'm doing all these prayers, I'm studying Bhagavatam. But Krishna gives news to Brahma. Whatever you're doing here, it is also part of my mercy. So Bhagavatam is actually the mercy, the book mercy of Krishna. And whatever that we do when we come in touch with Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam is so merciful, it actually reciprocates. That's why I always tell devotees that Krishna and Bhagavatam are more alive than you and I. We are walking dead, but Bhagavatam and Krishna, they are alive. They are alive. And in that particular shloka that I quoted to you, Prabhupada writes in the very important purport, he writes in the last line there, voluntary endeavor is the only qualification for spiritual perfection. Material acquisition of wealth and education are not considered. If you ask me, it sounds like a job application. Prabhupada's putting down, a very nice qualification needed, scope of employment. So if you want to touch Bhagavatam, voluntary endeavor is the only qualification needed. Just open the book on your own. Don't let someone force you. Just open it on your own. And even when you open it on your own, every time your mind tells you, enough, I've studied enough. Don't close the book, close the mind. Don't close the book, close the mind. And just go on, persevere with Bhagavatam. The more we volunteer in our endeavor, the more Bhagavatam reciprocates. Doesn't matter how much bank balance we have. Doesn't matter how educated we are. The illiterate Brahmana, in South India, whom Chaitanya Mahaprabhu saw, he did not know anything about how to read Bhagavad Gita. But Mahaprabhu saw tears of ecstasy coming in his eyes because he was following the orders of his spiritual master. And every spiritual master of ours, they would always unanimously declare that we must study Srila Prabhupada's books and we must study Srimad-Bhagavatam. So this is a very important way to glorify Bhagavatam and understand its significance. So from the ways Bhagavatam has come down through Brahma, what can we understand about the nature of Bhagavatam? Its knowledge is revealed, Prabhus, Matajis. Its knowledge is not learned. Very important. Material knowledge is learned, but spiritual knowledge is revealed. The Quran is revealed. The Bible was revealed. Bhagavatam is revealed. That is how it comes. So you can study Bhagavatam very much, but finally, until the end of the day, if Krishna does not give us the mercy or Bhagavatam doesn't reciprocate, we will not be able to understand Bhagavatam. That's why a great scholar, from any university may try to study Bhagavatam, but it is very difficult, to actually understand Bhagavatam. It will be very difficult. So this is a very important point. And if you understand and we understand that Bhagavatam is revealed knowledge, then what is the effect of revealed knowledge? Revealed knowledge means it is always practical and powerful. When something is revealed to us, the effect of it is always going to be very practical. You can test it and it'll be very powerful. In fact, this point is given in Bhagavatam by Shukadev Goswami himself in the second canto, third chapter, 12 verse, 2, 3, 12. How powerful this knowledge of Bhagavatam is its glory actually. Jnanam yada pratinivirta gunomi chakram atma prasada utayatra guneshu asanga kaivalya sammata patas atha bhakti yogaha ko nivrito harikatha suratim na kurya. This is a very beautiful verse from Bhagavatam, and the translation is really nice. Shukadev Goswami says, this transcendental knowledge, which is related to Krishna, what is the greatness of this? It is knowledge resulting in the complete suspension of the waves and whirlpools of the material modes. Very important point. Transcendental knowledge in relation to Krishna is knowledge that will cease. It will suspend whatever waves and whirlpools there are of the material modes. The material modes are considered like, how do I say? It is like whirlpools, They're very powerful and they have this great ability to always try and catch us. But the beauty of Bhagavatam is that when we take up Bhagavatam, it actually carries us above the waves and the whirlpools. This is a very important point. But the practical part of it is this. When you study Bhagavatam, you will find one thing very interesting the verse tells us. This knowledge, if you study of Bhagavatam, is self-satisfying, Prabhus and Mataji. Self-satisfying. What does it mean? Self-satisfying means that the moment you study Bhagavatam, your hankerings for the material world will decrease. You become satisfied in itself. It's a very important point. You become satisfied. And being transcendental, it is always approved by authorities. So who could fail, to be attracted to this point? It's very important. Give me just 1 minute. My door actually opened. I'm going to just shut the door for a while. Just 1 minute. Thank you. So from this, we can understand how powerful Bhagavatam is. So if you were to test Bhagavatam and you say, is Bhagavatam really revelatory? As you study Bhagavatam, you'll find that the knowledge that you get from it, it satisfies you. And satisfaction is such a difficult thing in this world, isn't it? So many things we want, but we are never satisfied by it. We just finished Vamandev's appearance, didn't we? I'm sure you all celebrated it last week. And what is the crux of Vamandev's pastime? It is when Bali Maharaj asked Vamandev, oh dear Brahmana, whatever that you want in this world, you ask. I have everything. I can give you cows. I can give you this. I can give you that. I can give you everything. But at the end of the day, the most important thing is, anything that is within my possession, which is everything, Bali thought, that's all yours. But Bali didn't realize nothing was in his possession. So Bhagavatam makes us realize that. When you come to Bhagavatam, you realize that whatever you have actually has no value. If it is not in relation to Krishna, it has no value. That is how we come to understand actually we don't control anything. That is how we understand that actually we cannot possess anything because nothing goes with us. The only thing that will go with us at the point of our death is Bhagavatam. Because this transcendental knowledge cannot be separated from the soul once it comes into our hearts. Very few people realize that. What do we carry when we die? We carry the stock of our devotional service. We don't carry anything else. This sharir leaves us at the funeral pyre. Even sharir leaves us. Nothing is with us after that. So that is why Bhagavatam is very powerful. And in that last line of this verse that I quoted to you, Shukadev Goswami says, after you understand all this, how can you not be attracted to Bhagavatam? You see? Now, not only was Bhagavatam spoken to Brahma, but Bhagavatam itself tells us historical accounts of other instances when this great science was narrated. For example, Brahma revealed Bhagavatam to Narada Muni, and Maitreya Muni revealed Bhagavatam to Vidura. And of course, Narada Muni inspired Vyasadeva to compose Bhagavatam. So these points are very important. The practical importance of Bhagavatam today to us in Kali Yuga is another reason for its glories, because all of us are now in Kali Yuga. And in Bhagavatam, in Kali Yuga, the mercy of Bhagavatam has been manifested actually through the mercy of the great conversation between Parikshit Maharaj and Shukadev Goswami, and the great conversation between Suta Goswami and the sages of Naimisharanya. It is by their mercy this has come. And if you look further, it is the mercy of Vyas Bhagwan and Narada Muni which heralded Bhagavatam into this world. Because Bhagavatam tells us, as Dwapara Yuga, was nearing its completion, signs of Kali Yuga's advent was becoming more and more prominent. And ignorance was prevailing. Deviations were actually increasing. Quarrel and hypocrisy was becoming greater. And Bhagavatam tells us that Krishna, the sun, the literal sun, Surya of the Yadus, he had already decided and departed from this horizon of this world. So this diminishing of the brilliant light of Krishna and the going of the Vrishni dynasty, it signified the full onslaught of the age of Kali. But the beauty is, Krishna, even though he left in person, he's so kind, that he actually gave us something which is as precious as he is. And that is why it is important for us to remember that even though we may think Krishna has left, the truth of the matter is all is not lost, hardly lost actually, because Krishna saw that the misfortune of this age is that many people will be misguided, they will be lazy, they will be always disturbed, they will quarrel, and there will always be dupliciousness. So Krishna gave his entire self in the form of the literary texts known as Srimad-Bhagavatam. This is a very important point. That's why in 1.3.40, Shukadeva Goswami declares so nicely, Idam Bhagavata Nama Puranam Brahma Samhitam Uttama Shloka Charitam Chakara Bhagavan Rishi Nishreyasaya Lokasya Dhanyam Swasti Ayanam Mahat. Mahat means great. So the translation to the verse is very important. This Srimad-Bhagavatam, what is its glory? It is the literary incarnation of Krishna. It is not different from Krishna. It is compiled by Vyasadeva, who is an incarnation of the Lord. It is meant for what? The ultimate good of all people. This is very important. If you tell the man on the street who doesn't understand anything about afterlife, but if you tell him this is for your good, he will understand this is important. See how nicely Bhagavatam has captured the essence. It is meant for people's good. That's why when we approach someone in devotional service with Bhagavatam, our mood must be that it is for their good. Our mood when studying Bhagavatam is not that, oh, I'm studying Bhagavatam because I can become a great scholar, I will get recognition, people will invite me to give classes, I have become Pandit. These are all the wrong reasons to approach Bhagavatam. The important reason to approach Bhagavatam is that we all study Bhagavatam so that it can be useful for the good of others. If we share it with others, it will be very helpful. Why? Because Bhagavatam is all successful, it is all blissful, and it is all perfect. That's why when you study Bhagavatam, you don't feel time running, You don't feel time running. And before you know it, time has run, but you are with Bhagavatam. And in the purport of 1.3.40, Prabhupada gives us the real glory of Bhagavatam. He says even Chaitanya Mahaprabhu himself, who is non-different from Krishna, who is the golden avatar of this age, he declared that Bhagavatam is the spotless sound representation of Krishna. There are so many selected histories, but Bhagavatam should be worshipped as respectfully as we worship the Lord. Non-different, Prabhupada says. How nice. So Prabhupada says not only should Bhagavatam be worshipped, but the person who gives us Bhagavatam, he is also worshipable. That is why Srila Prabhupada is our walking Bhagavata. That is why our spiritual masters are our walking Bhagavatas. And one can derive all benefits from the study of Bhagavatam, whatever that you can derive if the Lord was present before you. Towards the end of his purport, he says that. Whatever benefit you can derive, Sudama derived benefit by seeing Krishna. The gopis derive benefit from seeing Krishna. Prabhupada emphatically says in the purport that every one of us can derive that same benefit if we just study Bhagavatam. But notice the word, not touch, not see, study Bhagavatam. Not read, study Bhagavatam. So keep that in mind, because that is a very important point actually. And therefore, that is the reason why Bhagavata Purana is so powerful. And it is compiled, by Vyas Bhagwan. And Vyas Bhagwan gave it to his son. And of course, Shukadev Goswami, being the most respected and the most self-realized, he has chewed Srimad-Bhagavatam. He has now delivered this Bhagavatam to the great Emperor Parikshit, who then has delivered it to us, because today we are the recipients of this great mercy through Parampara. It's a very important point. So please remember, this Bhagavata Purana is very special. It is the sun, and it has arisen exactly after Krishna left for a reason, because it is actually true that Krishna never left. Krishna just left in personal form, and now he has come in Bhagavatam form. Therefore, persons, Kalau Nashta Drisham Esha. It's very nicely stated in 1.3.43. Kalau Nashta Drisham Esha. For those people, who have lost their sight. For persons who have lost their sight and their vision because of the dense darkness of ignorance in this age of Kali, Bhagavatam tells us they will get the shining light of Srimad Bhagavatam. In other words, men in this age of Kali, if we want to see the light of Krishna, then Prabhupada writes very nicely in the purport of that verse, 1.3.43. He says very clearly that they should take to these two books only. He writes it there. If anyone wants to see the real light of life, they must take to these two books only, and their aim of life will be fulfilled. Bhagavad Gita is a preliminary study of the Bhagavatam. And Prabhupada declares, Srimad Bhagavatam is the summum bonum of life, Lord Sri Krishna personified. So what must we do? Prabhupada also tells us what to do. His divine grace in that last line, of 1.3.43, he tells us we must therefore accept Srimad Bhagavatam as the direct representation of Lord Krishna. Now, you remember hearing the word study before this, Prabhu's Mataji's? And now we hear the word accept. There is a connection between these two words that Prabhupada is using. Because when you accept something, you can study it better. Think about it. If you accept that you have to study, you will study much better because you will concentrate on it. But if your mind doesn't accept, I don't like the subject, you'll find you'll never be attentive to it. I'm not sure about you, but I hated some subjects in school. It's not because I wasn't good at it, but I didn't like it. And the moment I wasn't attentive to the subject, I never could study it. So therefore, there's a strong link, between what we call attention and attraction. And when you are attentive, you're accepting something. And when you accept something, it becomes attractive. Even in my Guru Maharaj used to say, if husband and wife, if they cannot accept each other's mistakes, they'll kill each other. There'll be Kurukshetra in the house. There won't be Golok Vrindavan in the house. Even for that also, we have to accept each other. And how do you accept each other? You study each other. You study, this is something he likes. Then you do something he likes. Or she likes something, you do something that she likes. Why should you do something they don't like? Then everything from the kitchen will come flying out. So this is what he told us practically. And it's true. Even for Bhagavatam also it is true. So therefore the glory of Bhagavatam is in understanding these two very important words. Acceptance of Bhagavatam and study of Bhagavatam. If we study on the platform of acceptance, then Bhagavatam, that beautiful relishable taste of Bhagavatam, it will come out to us actually. Now we come to another aspect of the glory of Bhagavatam. This is very important. Another aspect of the glory of Bhagavatam is, why is it that Bhagavatam is so potent and pure as a scripture? This is a very important point actually. To understand this, we have to understand that portion of Bhagavatam where Vyas Bhagwan sat down, and as he sat down at the beginning of Kali Yuga, he meditated on the good of humanity. And then he saw something terrible. In 1.4.17 and 18, he saw that whatever happens in this world, everything in this world will deteriorate. Bhautikhanam cha bhavanam, shakti rasam cha tat kritam. This is the nature of this world. You realize that everything in this world will deteriorate. Your house will deteriorate, your body deteriorates, even relationships deteriorate in this world. Nothing will last, So he could understand then that many people in this world will become disturbed because of this great disturbance of deterioration. So what did he do? Like a very good personality, and he's Vyas Bhagwan, he began to think, I should gather everything. I should put together. I should put together the Vedas. I should do the Puranas. I should do the Itihasas. I should put all of this together. And in that way, it will be perfect. So he did everything. And that's why Vyasadeva compiled the Mahabharata. He put the Vedas into proper distinctions and appointed each person, right? Each author or each acharya, so to speak, of different facets of Vedas, Jaimini and all these persons, he divided them. And then he looked at the Itihasas, who were supplementaries to the Puranas, and he did that also. But after all that, he was still dissatisfied in his heart. He was wondering, why is it that my mind is not satisfied? I've engaged in the working of the total welfare of the people, but I still don't feel that. And this satisfaction, this dissatisfaction was so strong that Vyas Bhagwan began to reflect. And he asked within his heart, I must be feeling incomplete because there's something I've not done yet. And what is it that I've not done? Kimva Bhagavata Dharma na prayena nirupitaha priya paramahamsanam ta eva achyuta priyaha. In 1.4.31 of Srimad-Bhagavatam, Vyas Bhagwan actually begins to reflect. The reason why I myself am not self-satisfied, the reason why I myself am not feeling satisfaction in the heart is because I have not specifically pointed out the devotional service of the Lord, which is dear both to the perfect beings and the infallible Lord. And this is the reason why we are also not satisfied. Every time, Prabhus and Matajis, you feel some hankering or dissatisfaction in the heart, this is the reason why we are feeling dissatisfied. Not because we have not compiled Bhagavatam. He has done that for us. Vyas Bhagwan has done it for us. We don't have to worry. But we have not studied Bhagavatam. We have not glorified Bhagavatam. And we have not spoken about Bhagavatam. That is why we are dissatisfied. And at that specific time, as he was feeling that way, because he was a sincere soul and disciple, Narada Muni walked into the ashram, his spiritual master. And when Narada Muni walked into the ashram, Narada looked at Vyas Bhagwan and he said, Vyasa, I'm noticing that you are not looking very satisfied. This is the greatness of our spiritual masters. They can see the disease on our face immediately. We may hide, but they will reveal. So Vyas Bhagwan said, something must be wrong here. There is a reason why you are dissatisfied. And in 158, he actually endorses what is exactly said in 1.4.31. 1.4.31 was spoken by the sincere disciple, and 1.58 was diagnosis by the spiritual master. And he says, Bhavata nudita prayam yasho bhagavato malam yenaiva sauna tushyeta manyeta darshanam khilam. And the translation is very nice. He says, Vyas Bhagwan, I think you have not actually broadcast the sublime and spotless glories of the Lord. That philosophy which does not satisfy the transcendental senses of the Lord is considered worthless. And Bhagavatam is an entire rendition of the transcendental glories of Krishna. So it is definitely worth it. Very, very worth it. And that is why, Prabhus and Matajis, one very important reason why Bhagavatam is so potent is because the moment you touch it and you broadcast it, it will actually throw away all dissatisfaction in the heart. When we preach Krishna consciousness, you will realize that if you tell them about the kingdom of the God, the common man, all of us, if we talk to them, what happens to you when you die? After a while, they will stop you and say, listen, I don't know what's going to happen when I die. I am not dead yet. You tell me something that will help me now. And this knowledge helps them now. It's helping us now. All of us have become satisfied in our hearts because we have taken up to Bhagavatam study. That's why there is no hankering in the heart. And why is there no hankering in the heart? Why is Bhagavatam so potent, so pure as a scripture? The answer is given in 5.18.26 of Srimad-Bhagavatam. Antar bahischa kilaloka palakai adrishta rupo vicharasi urusvanaha sa ishwarastvam ya idam vashe nayan namna yata darumayin narastriyam. The translation is very beautiful. My dear Lord, the residents of Jambudvipa, they are praying. Just like a puppeteer, can control the dancing dolls, in the same way, your Lordship controls all living entities in this world. But one thing is very important. All the great leaders of societies, communities, countries, no one can realize you actually. The only way to realize you, my Lord, is to hear the vibrations of the Vedic mantras. Only that way we can appreciate you. What is Bhagavatam but an entire vibration of Vedic mantras? And one thing that's really important, when you look at the second line of the shloka, adrishta rupo vicharasi. Adrishta rupo vicharasi means wandering silently amongst. Krishna is actually a wanderer. If you sing Jaya Radha Madhava, you'll know that Krishna is wandering, in the groves of Golok Vrindavan, in the Vrindavan forest. He's always wandering. In fact, Krishna never took any transport. You never hear Krishna going on a train. Of course, those days, no train. But you never heard anyone, saying, Krishna, you have to get on a... Hardly he took bullock cart. He was walking all the time, everywhere. And Krishna, this verse tells us, Adrishta Rupo. He is the unseen wanderer. And where is he walking? He's walking in all the shlokas of Bhagavatam. He's wandering in the shlokas of Bhagavatam. So therefore, every shloka, the beauty of Bhagavatam is Krishna himself is the supreme wanderer in these verses. If we put a little bit of endeavor, what will happen? We can actually capture Krishna in our hearts. And he will capture the audience with his mercy. I like this phrase. If we can just put a little endeavor to Krishna, then with his mercy, we can actually capture the Lord in our hearts. We can frame him in our hearts. And then he will capture others whom we speak to by his mercy. We cannot do it, but he can do it. Just we need to chant Bhagavatam with them. And because he's wandering in the Bhagavatam, they will become attracted to Bhagavatam. This is the glory of Bhagavatam. And what does Bhagavatam reveal? Srimad-Bhagavatam Puranam amalam Yad Vaishnavam Priyam Yasmin Paramahamsyam amalam Jnanam Param Giyate Tatra Jnana Viraga Bhakti Sahitam Naishkamya Mavishkritam Tatshranavans Supatan Vicharana Paro Bhaktya Vimuche Naraha. This shloka is perhaps the most important shloka to understand the glory of Bhagavatam. It comes, I think, in 12th canto, 13th chapter, 18th verse. And in this, we understand now, as we wind down our time to understand the glories of Bhagavatam, Srimad-Bhagavatam is the spotless Purana, Shukadeva Goswami declares. Why? It is very dear to the Vaishnavas. Anything that is dear to Vaishnavas, if you study, you become dear to them. Isn't it true? Because the Vaishnavas become pleased when you do something for Krishna. It is dear to the Vaishnavas because it describes pure and supreme knowledge of the Paramahamsas, the pure devotees. This Bhagavatam reveals to us the means to become free from all material work. That's the beauty of Bhagavatam. It's not in the air, Bhagavatam is on the ground, actually. It reveals to us how, despite being in this material world, we can come out of it. If you read Bhagavatam, half of all the great devotees in Bhagavatam were not sitting in a cave. They were not meditating someplace so quiet that they had no problems. They were in the thick of life like you and me. Ambrish Maharaj was emperor of the whole world. Parikshit Maharaj was very busy. Prahlad Maharaj was just a little boy. Dhruva Maharaj was a young Kshatriya who was driven by material ambition. Sudama was very poor. He had so much challenges in his own life. Hanumanji, he chants in Bhagavatam that he has so much disqualifications. Na janmanunam mahato na saubhagam navang na buddhir na krite stesha hetoho tairyad vrishishtan apino vanaukashas Chakara sakye bata Lakshmana grajaha. He says, oh Lord Ramchandra, I have so many disqualifications. I don't have a house I can invite you on. I don't know which tree I will stay in the night, isn't it? I move from tree to tree. I don't have any nice language to receive you. I speak gibberish. I don't have any educational qualification. Hanumanji didn't study BSc, MSc, nothing. He was just, a devotee. I have no wealth. I have no opulence. And yet, despite all my disqualification, you have accepted me as a friend. See, Bhagavatam shows us how practical it is. It doesn't matter, what material engagement we are in. From any point in our life, we can approach Bhagavatam. From any situation in life, we can approach Bhagavatam. This is a very important point. And not only does Bhagavatam reveal to us the process of coming out from this material world, Bhagavatam reveals to us renunciation. Renunciation is so important. Parikshit Maharaj had everything, yet he renounced the world to hear Bhagavatam. He could have counteracted Shringi Brahmana. How dare you curse me? You know who I am. I'm Parikshit Maharaj. I was protected. If I was Parikshit Maharaj, that 7 days, I would have probably taken a lawsuit against Shringi Brahmana. And promptly I would have lost, because after 7 days, Yamaraj would have come to claim me. But he didn't waste time. He sat down to hear Bhagavatam. His renunciation was so deep that he understood the higher purpose of his life. So Bhagavatam teaches us how to renounce. Bhagavatam teaches us devotion. Who can teach us more devotion in Bhagavatam than Vritrasur? Vritrasur taught us the emblem of devotion, isn't it? Why? Because even though he was born to fight and vanquish Indra, even though he knew that it was guaranteed Indra would vanquish him, he never felt discouraged. He never felt unwanted. He saw the hand of Krishna and he fixed his heart at the lotus feet of the Lord, even in the face of material defeat. If that is not practical to us, then I don't know what else is. Because every day we are faced with material challenges, and every day material nature defeats us. In fact, most of the time, by the time we end our life, we'll all be materially bankrupt, because no money will go with us anyway. Nothing is going with us. You may end up being a solvent for the whole life, but by the end of your life, you must become declared bankrupt. But with Bhagavatam, spiritually, you will never be bankrupt. Never be bankrupt. So now we come to this important point. To understand glory is one thing, but how to study Bhagavatam, to actually relish its glories, is another thing. And so let us spend the last few minutes trying to understand what Bhagavatam tells us on how to study Bhagavatam. And let us also hear from Srila Prabhupada, how Prabhupada told us to study Srimad-Bhagavatam. The important thing of studying Bhagavatam is in that last line, of 12, 13, 18 of Srimad-Bhagavatam. That nice Tat Shranavan Supatan Vicharana Paro. These three are the royal roads for us to study Bhagavatam. The first thing we have to do is Shranavan, Tat Shranavan. We have to hear first. So hearing Bhagavatam is very important. And how to hear it? Attentively and submissively. These are the two pillars on which we have to hear. And these two pillars are given very nicely in the purport of first canto, first chapter, second verse. Right at the very start, in a very important purport, Prabhupada tells us the proper method for receiving this transcendental knowledge is to hear it submissively. A challenging attitude cannot help one realize this transcendental message. So the moment we are filled with ego or envy and we are challenging, we will lose Krishna. We will lose Bhagavatam. You all at some point must have been teaching. Some of you are teachers. You know every teacher has two kinds of students. The student who challenges you just for the sake of challenging, and the student who asks you so many questions because they really want to learn. Every teacher will tell you that student who really wants to learn, the teacher is ready to bend over backwards to help the student. Krishna is like that. Bhagavatam is like that. But if we want to challenge because we think this knowledge is just theoretical knowledge, then you and I can argue till the cows come home. But what is the point? We are not tasting that knowledge. So attentiveness is needed. Only when we are attentive to Bhagavatam can we become submissive. And one word Prabhupada uses in the purport of 112 is the word shushro shuhu. This word Prabhupada says is very important. This is the third pillar. The third pillar is one must be anxious to hear about this transcendental knowledge. We must really be eager. Anxiety in spiritual life doesn't mean high blood pressure. Anxiety in spiritual life means eagerness. Eagerness. If your blood pressure is very high, you'll end up in hospital. But if you are eager, that anxiety, you won't end up in hospital. In fact, you will avoid hospital. You will become very peaceful, actually. So this is a very important point. So this is how we must hear Prabhu Sarmata. Somebody is not muted. Okay, fine. Second, very important, supatan. Once we are hearing attentively, submissively, and eagerly, these three things we have, then we should, after here, we must do supatan. Supatan means properly chant. What does it mean, properly chant? Repeat exactly what we have heard. That is being proper. Proper means whatever you have heard, you repeat. Don't mix here, don't add, subtract, multiply, and divide. Don't use Bhagavatam for your own ideas. Sometimes the mind's tendency is when you sit on Vyasasan, you see someone you don't like, you read the shloka, and you find something there that will criticize that person. That is not Bhagavatam. that is Manogatan. That is the philosophy of the mind. Never use Bhagavatam for ulterior motives, because if you want to cheat Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam will cheat you. You cannot cheat Krishna. Krishna knows our heart. So therefore, supatan means to properly chant. Please repeat what we have heard. Do not speculate and do not alter. The word that is used, is chastity. Tasmat ekena manasa. Chastity. That means we have one-pointed attention. Be chaste to Bhagavatam. Purity means in Bhagavatam to be strictly under the shelter of parampara. Whatever Prabhupada has given us, we simply repeat. The value of studying Prabhupada's books is that we just have to repeat and practice. That's all. Repeat, practice. Practice, repeat. Repeat and practice. In fact, this point is given by Shukdev Goswami in the very famous verse of 10.1.4. Nivrita tarshai upagiyamana bhavav shodachotra mano birama ka uttama shloka gunanuvada puman virajeta vinapasukna. In this verse, Shukdev Goswami, he tells very nicely that glorification of the Supreme Personality of Godhead must be done. It must be done. It must be performed. But it must be performed through the parampara system. It must be conveyed from spiritual master to disciple. So whatever we are repeating must come from Prabhupada and the Acharyas. And if we do that, then supatan is happening. So first we hear, right? And we hear submissively, attentively, and eagerly with anxiety. But after hearing, we must use that what we have heard and repeat it properly. We must repeat it in a chaste manner. It doesn't need to be something new. Sometimes we have this idea after studying the same shloka, we deliver the same lecture, we think, oh, the audience wants something new. That is material thinking. In Bhagavatam, you just repeat the same shloka. Now, Damodar programs are coming up in New Zealand also. You will all go from house to house. You will repeat this Damodar Leela 100 times, but you will never embellish it. You will state it as it is. And when you state it as it is, no matter how many times you state it, you come out relishing it. This is chastity. This is supatan. And the last thing that we must use is the word vicharana paro. Vicharana paro is very important. It is directly translated as, in the synonyms, who is serious about understanding. In other words, if we are really serious about understanding Krishna, vicharana paro means we have to contemplate and put into practice. That is how we study. In fact, real study begins by hearing and then reciting and then being serious about understanding this so that we can apply it to our lives. This is the meaning of vicharana paro. So Bhagavatam must be applied. And what is the platform on which we can receive this great Bhagavatam? How do we receive it? We receive it by hearing, right? But we also receive it by behavior. This is so important. Bhagavatam is not a ritual. It is not a philosophical literature. Sometimes, what has happened is Bhagavatam has become professional. Prabhupada condemns this. He says we all sit down and we hear professional recitation. I'm from Singapore, so I've never been exposed to a professional recitation of Bhagavatam. But one time when I was in Rajkot, I was passing by and I heard, in the traffic, we could hear the loudspeaker. It was really a performance, because after every line, there's some music, there's some, effect and here and there. The audience are feeling very happy. But after that, is there any practice to Bhagavatam? This is very important. So what satisfies Bhagavatam is what satisfies Krishna. And how do we satisfy Krishna? If we really want to glorify Bhagavatam, we must satisfy Krishna. And the way to do that is in the 4th canto, 11th chapter, 13th verse. Narada Muni tells this very nice point, no, I don't think it's Narada. I think it's Swayambhuva Manu. Titikshaya karunaya maitriya chakila jantushu samadvena cha sarvatma Bhagavan samprasidati. Samprasidati means satisfied. So it is nicely stated, Lord Krishna becomes very satisfied when his devotee greets other people. So nice, huh? When the devotee greets other people, how? With tolerance, mercy, friendship, and equality. So you see, what is Bhagavatam telling us to do? It's telling us to behave. It's telling us to act. And that is why Bhagavatam tells us one other very important behavior we must cultivate. Besides being tolerant, merciful, friendly, and seeing Krishna in everything, or at least seeing his hand at every junction, we must also get rid of the most difficult obstacle that prevents us from actually relishing Bhagavatam. Dharma projita kaitava atra paramo nirmat saranam satam vedyam vastava atra vastu shivadam tapatrayan moolanam Srimad-Bhagavate Mahamuni-krite Kim va paraishvaraha sadyo hriddi avaruddhate atra kritibihi shushrubish tatshana. This is 1st canto, 1st chapter, 2nd verse. The most important quality that Shukadev Goswami is telling us is to reject all religious activities which are materially motivated. And it is materially motivated on the basis of envy. Envy. Nirmatsaranam means to become free of envy. If we study Bhagavatam, but we continue to remain envious of each other, then we are not applying Bhagavatam. Bhagavatam means we must reject any activity which has a material motivation. That is why Parikshit means to examine. Parikshit Maharaj examined his life, so that he only wanted to see Krishna. He wanted to sieve out anything that was material. And that is how we must learn to live in our life. We must live our life in such a way that we must inspect ourselves. Why am I performing a service? Is it because I'm materially motivated? Is there some name, some fame, some puja, some pratishta? Are these the things that motivate me? Or am I doing it because it pleases Krishna and pleases the devotees? If it pleases Krishna and pleases devotees, and that is my mood, then when you approach Bhagavatam, when you speak Bhagavatam, then you will naturally act Bhagavatam. It is very natural. So getting rid of envy and material motivation is so important. That is how we increase our chastity to Bhagavatam. That is how we become attentive to Krishna. And when we become Krishna Matihi, then only we can become Krishna Ratihi. Otherwise, it is not possible. So how to conclude our time together? Our time together must be concluded by remembering 3 very, very beautiful shlokas, which I alluded to at the beginning when we came together. These 3 shlokas, they tell us how first we should be with Bhagavatam, and then the effect of Bhagavatam. And if we can just put them up, paste them up somewhere in our houses, every morning we wake up, we see the shlokas, then the glories of Bhagavatam will always enliven us. In 284 Srimad-Bhagavatam, this shloka tells us very nicely the practical way to approach Bhagavatam. Shranavataha shraddaya nityam granatascha swachestitam kalena na ati dirgena bhagavan vishate hriddhi. And if you look at the word-to-word translation, the secret to studying Bhagavatam is given. Shranavataha means those who hear. Shraddaya, normally we think of Shraddha and Shraddaya as faith. It's our faith. But Prabhupada translates Shraddhaya very beautifully. He says Shraddhaya means in earnestness. In other words, those who are hearing Bhagavatam earnestly. What else must we do? Shranavataha Shraddhaya Nityam. Nityam, like I told you, actually Nityam, if you look at the word to word, it is regularly. Remember in the beginning also, Nityam Bhagavata Sevaya, regularly. But if you look at the word to word transliteration for 284, Prabhupada writes regularly, comma, always. So this is the point I was saying, because I can chant one round per life, and I can be very regular. I can say I'm hearing Bhagavatam once a year, and I can be very regular, but it must be always. So Shranavataha Shraddhaya Nityam. Those who are eagerly, earnestly hearing, and those who are hearing regularly and always. And what else must we do when we hear Bhagavatam? Granatascha swa chestitam. Very nice point. Granataha means taking the matter. Cha means also. Swa chestitam means seriously by one's own endeavor. In other words, we must put endeavor when we study Bhagavatam. Then the glories of Bhagavatam will be revealed. Brahmaji put so much endeavor when he sat down to do tapa. Then it became revealed. Sudama walked and walked and walked and tolerated so much difficulty before it was revealed. How much sacrifice the great devotees performed in their devotional service. How much tapas and austerity. There must be endeavor. We cannot sit back and think, now it must all come on my head. We have to become qualified. Prabhupada always said, we must become qualified. God is not cheap, and he's definitely not free. God is the most precious of all precious. Prabhupada said one time, that if you go to the gold shop, 90% of customers are looking at gold. Very few people look at diamonds because they are not qualified to buy diamonds. So we must become qualified to purchase this great, great devotional service from Bhagavatam by endeavoring, seriously taking the matter and endeavoring. And for those who do this, the next two lines tell us the history. What will happen, the effect? Na ati kalena, in no time, na ati dirgena, in no time at all. In no time, very, very quickly. Bhagavan Vishate Hriddhi. Krishna will manifest in our hearts within a short time. So beautiful. And how does he manifest in our hearts? Through the glories of Bhagavatam. Pravishta karna randrena, swanam bhava saroruram, dhunoti shamalam Krishnaha, salilasya yatha sharat. Beautiful verse. The next verse, 285. This sound incarnation of Krishna, that means this Srimad-Bhagavatam, it enters into the heart of the devotee who is self-realized. And when it enters into the heart, what does it do? Bhagavatam sits on the lotus flower of that devotee's loving relationship with Krishna. By the way, Bhagavatam is also very poetic. If you hear this part, you realize how poetic it is. Krishna comes in the form of Bhagavatam into our ear, and he sits on the lotus flower of his loving relationship. And when he sits inside, what does Krishna do? What does Bhagavatam do? It cleanses the dust of material association. It's like a transcendental vacuum cleaner. It just clears our heart of lust, anger, anchoring. Just like now, I think monsoon season in India is there. Traditionally, if they were more structured, minus the climate change, just before the monsoon season is coming, it gets really hot. And at that point of time, everyone's waiting for the rain. And when the first autumnal rains come, salilasya yatha sharat, they become very pleasing to the persons. The smell of rain and the touch of water. That's how Bhagavatam is. See how practical, but everyone can understand this, the way it is described. And one last point. Dautatmaha Purusha Krishna, Padamulam na munchati, Mukta Sarva Parikleshaha, Pantaha Swasharanam Yataha. A devotee whose heart has been cleansed in this way, what happens? That devotee will never relinquish the lotus feet of Krishna because they always satisfy him. Just like a traveler after a troubled journey, what does he do? He comes home and he's very peaceful. This is the glory of Bhagavatam. And what did Prabhupada tell us about Bhagavatam? If you have time, sometime, Prabhupada gave a class on Srimad-Bhagavatam 291 on the 20th of April, 1972 in Tokyo. And in Tokyo, Prabhupada gives this beautiful point in his lecture. He says, practice it. In this way, practice one mantra daily. One mantra daily. Oh, the reference of the third verse, 284, 285, 286. Yes. So I'm coming back to this. In the excerpt from Prabhupada's class, Prabhupada says, practice it. In this way, practice one mantra daily. Each mantra will purify you 100 yards daily. That's what Prabhupada is saying. Go forward. These mantras are very powerful, given by Vyasadeva Goswami, vibrated and spoken. Now Prabhupada quotes, Shuka Mukhad, Drava Samyutram. That is explained in the beginning. Like a ripened fruit in the tree is already very sweet. If it is touched by the beak of the parrot, it becomes sweeter. So Prabhupada says, we should try to learn, get it by heart, at least one shloka, 2 shlokas a week. And if we chant, just like you're chanting so many songs, Prabhupada says, it is not to show some scholarship that I know so much Sanskrit. No, it is just offered with humility to learn the mantra, because one will chant this mantra. And then in the class, he's telling each one to chant. And then he ends the class by saying, so you have to study like that. So many shlokas. I am taking so much labor. Prabhupada is saying this. I'm taking so much labor. If you do not read it carefully, it is not for that I am making business, for selling only. No, you must all read like this. Practice. Why so much trouble is being taken? Word to word meaning and transliteration. If you chant this mantra, that vibration will cleanse the universe, the atmosphere. And wherever you go, in any part of the world, if you can chant this mantra, oh, you'll be received like God. Jai Grantaraj Srimad-Bhagavatam. Jai, all glories to Srila Prabhupada. All glories to the assembled Vaishnavas. Hare Krishna. Thank you, Krishna Chandra Prabhu.
Thank you, Prabhu. we are indebted, actually. Thank you so much for enlivening us with your knowledge and giving the importance of Srimad-Bhagavatam. So, is there any questions? You are most welcome to ask. I think Nit Gopal Prabhu has got one.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna, Danwar Pram. Thank you very much for the wonderful class, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, I just had a couple of questions. One is regarding Srimad-Bhagavatam verse where it says that regular attendance in classes on Bhagavatam and by rendering of service to the pure devotee, all that is troublesome to the heart is almost completely destroyed.
Yes.
So my first question is, why is it almost completely destroyed? Why not it is not completely destroyed? And then the second question I have is, you mentioned that we should develop.
Maybe I'll take the first question.
Sorry, yeah.
Otherwise, with me, I'll forget the second question.
Sure, bro.
The first question is very nice, because there, Prabhupada translate is, all that is troubles to the heart is almost completely. The reason why it's not completely destroyed is we have the sharir still. Until the sharir leaves us, at the end of the day, this body is subjected to the stringent laws of material nature. So the body at the end of the day will still give us trouble. We may not feel it so much, but Bhagavatam can stop all other troubles for us. It will also help our consciousness also to survive the difficult point of death, but it will be difficult. If you read Prabhupada's Lilamrita, at some point, someone asked Prabhupada when he was in difficulty, why can't you just make the troubles go away? And Prabhupada said, for one who is born, death is certain. And this sharir means there will always be difficulty. That's why it's almost completely destroyed. It's close enough.
Thank you, Prabhu. And my other question was, you mentioned about developing good qualities while we're studying Srimad-Bhagavatam, and we shouldn't be envious, and we should make that endeavor. But do these qualities that we have, these anathas, obviously they are not going to go away, or do they go away with our own endeavors? Or really they go away due to the blessings of studying Srimad-Bhagavatam and the mercy of Lord Krishna and Guru? So should our endeavor really be to study and hear Bhagavatam, hear and chant, rather than trying to develop the good qualities? Because they will naturally what they should, or do they naturally, come about? Or
Yeah, that's a very good point. Actually, the process is such, Prabhu, that if we study Bhagavatam and follow the principles of devotional service, then it's nicely stated in Bhagavatam, all the qualities of the devatas, they come automatically to a devotee. So the qualities that the devotees have, they come on the basis of our sincere surrender and practice of the devotional service. But practice of devotional service, if you study it carefully, is actually about acquisition of quality. For example, Trinadapi Sunichena means we have to be humbler than a blade of grass, more tolerant than a tree. We cannot turn around and say, no, these things will come automatic. I'm not bothered whether I'm tolerant now or I'm humble now. I'm not bothered about these things. Let me just do the process of devotional service. It doesn't work that way. A devotee who takes up devotional service automatically becomes mindful about his behavior, because our behavior must be pleasing to other entities. And these acharyas have given so many different qualities by which we should actually elevate our behavior. So it's a combination, Prabhu. As we study Bhagavatam, Bhagavatam is mercy of the Lord. The mercy of the Lord will qualify us and give us good qualities. But if we are seriously endeavoring to become more tolerant, if we pray to Krishna and we understand from Bhagavatam how tolerance is achieved, how we can become humbler, how this pride in us is always pinching us, this is serious understanding. This is vicharana paro. When one contemplates on these things carefully, because we are studying Bhagavatam, then Krishna's mercy from Bhagavatam, it will descend on us. And gradually you see those who are really serious in Bhagavatam and devotional service, their qualities, they shine, and they become very attractive to the people. So it's actually, how can I guess the best English word to use is, it is a seamless process. It is seamless and it must come naturally. But you cannot ignore the fact that half of Bhagavatam speaks about qualities. Half of Bhagavatam is about how to behave, how Vritasur behaved, how Sudama behaved, how Dhruva behaved. So these are very important things for us to teach. Otherwise, what happens is Bhagavatam is just a book and our behavior is very bad. Kanishta Adhikaris, right? Sastras tell us, they see Krishna only in the deity, and therefore their behavior is not reflective of a devotee. And they hurt so many living entities. That is not what we want. Bhagavatam wants us to elevate ourselves from that level. I hope that's useful, Prabhu. It's
thank you, Prabhuji. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
Hare Krishna.
Thank you.
Anybody else would like to ask any question? You're most welcome.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji.
Haribol.
Prabhu, you nicely mentioned about being, following the process that Maharaj mentions.
Yes, Prabhu.
That's Supatan Vicharana Paro. And somebody makes that endeavor to spend time with Bhagavatam. But my question is more on a practical level where people are busy with their own life and family and things. And if the preference is given to chanting, a little bit of deity worship, it's very difficult to sometimes find the time to actually spend with Bhagavatam on a regular basis, as you mentioned. And because that doesn't happen, you don't have the taste for reading regularly and being attracted to Bhagavatam or any other Prabhupada's books for that matter. So from your experience, Prabhu, would you suggest or give some tips for devotees to inculcate that habit on a daily basis to develop that attraction?
Yeah, this is a nice point. I was looking at a lecture from Srila Prabhupada when Krishna Chandra Prabhu kindly gave me this topic. And Prabhupada at one point says, now we have got so many books. So whenever you find time, you must find time. Prabhupada emphatically says, whenever you find time, then he says, you must find time. There is so much time. Time is Krishna, and Krishna is time. And Krishna is Yogeshwar. He's master of the mystics. If our ichcha, if our desire to study Srila Prabhupada's books, because he said, try to understand, always read the books. Don't try to understand Krishna ordinarily. If he said so many places, therefore you must study my books very scrutinizingly. All these are his statements. If we understand the emphasis Prabhupada put on the books, then Prabhu, 15 minutes a day in the morning of reading say Bhagavad Gita, one shloka, and take one purport, study it before you go for 15 minutes, and then keep the book with you throughout the day. Wherever you have time, you apply your mind to the purport you just read, apply your mind to what you have just studied, So Bhagavatam in the morning, 15 minutes. And then in the evening, if you're very busy, you come back and take 15 minutes of your time and sit down and read Bhagavad Gita and study the purport. And just remember the purport and Bhagavad Gita shloka before you go to sleep. I think we all can give 15 minutes in the morning, and we all can give 15 minutes in the evening to Krishna. Worst case scenario. So in that way, if we at least make that effort to study Prabhupada's books, and I'm talking about the lowest of the lowest 15 minutes, when we get a taste for it, Krishna will arrange our lives in such a way with our sincere endeavor that we will somehow or another be able to find time to study. It cannot be a logical affair, even though time management in material world appears logical. But Bhagavatam is Krishna, and Krishna is time. Krishna can manage our time better than we can manage it. So if we sincerely study Bhagavatam with the mood that Krishna, I'm really pressed for time, but I have great desire to study Bhagavatam, but I do not want to compromise on taking care of honoring prasadam, doing my deity worship. Please give me the intelligence to handle these matters. He will do it, Prabhu. It is our practical experience that he will do it. I hope that's helpful, Suhat Prabhu, because what you asked is a very practical question.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji.
Thank you.
Prabhuji, just on the following on that same question, how we can make this desire strong to read?
I think the best way to increase our desire to read is to at least have a reading program amongst devotees. Sadhu Sangha is the way in which we can collectively increase our desire to read. I'm sure you all must be having your reading programs and you all must be very active in it. In Singapore, we call it the Read and Relish program. So what happens is every part of Singapore where there are more than 2 devotees living in the area, they come together and they will read. Now with the Zoom, we have multiple levels of reading programs where devotees, according to their nature, their relationship, they come together every day at some point, and a fixed time, and they all read Prabhupada's books systematically. And that way, for the rest of the week, because at some point of the day, they know we are all reading together, they are also incentivized to read on their own. So the desire to read actually improves on the basis of Sadhu Sangha. And this reading is really nice. After a while, everyone just looks forward. 7 p.m., we all know we have to read. So we all put aside everything. And if not for anything, at least you know that someone is checking over you so that, the rascal mind doesn't say, never mind, let it go today. And we all have some subtle pride, right? So we must be able to say something during the reading, isn't it? So that means we have to also study. So in that way, Krishna also is cheating us, but he's cheating us the right way. This is how the dangers of the mind are there. But in Sadhu Sangha, everything is possible. I hope that's all right. A congregation that chants together, reads together, will actually grow together.
Thank you, Prabhu. Very nice. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Any other devotee would like to ask any other question? You're most welcome.
Hare Krishna, Devakinandan. Thank you for the nice class. Just one clarification. You mentioned that Vyasadeva is a literal incarnation of Krishna, but he was feeling dissatisfied. How can we reconcile that the literal incarnation can feel dissatisfaction?
Yeah,
and then Narad Muni to come.
Yeah, actually in Bhagavatam, there are many instances like that, Nandavraj Prabhu. For example, Prithu Maharaj was actually an empowered incarnation of the Lord. But we remember how, he became very disturbed by Indra's attempts to stop his Ashwamedha sacrifice. So sometimes Krishna, even as an empowered incarnation, teaches us very important principles. The nice point about this is given by Prabhupada in a purport in the first canto. I can't remember the exact purport, but it goes this way. The exact citation, but it goes this way. Prabhupada says that sometimes a mother wants to teach the daughter-in-law through the daughter. sometimes you can't tell the daughter-in-law something directly, right? Otherwise, there may be issues. Mother-in-law, daughter-in-law is always a very delicate situation, and no husband wants to go in between. So what happens generally is that if daughter and daughter-in-law in the kitchen, the mother will come and tell the daughter, you should do this, you should do that, you should do this. Now daughter is already thinking, okay, fine, maybe I made some mistake by why you are saying all these things, but actually it is for the daughter-in-law. So Prabhupada writes, even the great devotees, exalted personalities, the Lord teaches us through these great personalities. So Narada's role is also very amazing, because he comes as the spiritual master of Vyas Bhagwan. Another discrepancy people ask is, why should the literary incarnation of the Lord have a spiritual master? Then the question can be asked, why did Krishna have Sandipani Muni as his guru? This is how the Lord himself, being transcendental in nature, teaches us through mistakes sometimes apparently, or through lessons that we should learn. So when Vyas Bhagwan himself sat down and did everything right but missed out Krishna, he is teaching us an important point, that no matter how qualified we are, if we miss out Krishna in our life, then we are in difficulty. So it is Krishna being a great teacher in that way, Nanda Prabhu. I hope that is useful.
Thank you, Prabhu. Nice example. Very illustrative.
Thank you, Prabhu.
So once again, Devakinandan Prabhu, thank you so much for
Thank
taking
you.
and being with us. I would request His Grace Nanraj Prabhu to conclude from here. Nanraj Prabhu.
Hare Krishna, Devakinandan Prabhu, on behalf of the devotees here in Auckland and also on this platform, we'd like to really give you our heartfelt thanks for giving you a valuable association this evening. Very deep class on how to relish Srimad-Bhagavatam. You've given us so many wonderful tips on how to relish, what is the effect of Srimad-Bhagavatam, the mood of studying, and giving some practical tips and examples. We are very much indebted to you for these instructions, and we hope we can imbibe this in our life and practice it, as you say, and then make our life spiritually very progressive. I had a good fortune of meeting your spiritual master in Fiji, and had the good opportunity to serve him for a few weeks at our home. So I know Maharaj is like a walking Bhagavat. So you are his very close disciple and a wonderful example of what a walking Bhagavat should be. So we are very fortunate to have your association, and we'd like to thank you. And we hope that in future you'll give your association again. So Prabhu, thank you very much, and all the best. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Thank you, Prabhu. I must be indebted to all of you. You have given me so much sadhu sangha. Whole day I had to spend remembering this topic, because in this way, this is the best engagement. I wish you all the best, and thank you so much for your association. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. Hare Krishna. Thank you.
Devakinandan Prabhu ki jai.
Anta Kori Vaishnavinda ki
Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Gaurapada. Thank you. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna.
Radhe, somebody could sing Nrsimha prayer?
Girivadas.
Okay, Prabhu. Yes.
Namaste Narasimhaya Praladaya Hiranyakashi Purvasaha Silatankanakalaye Ito Nasingha Parato Nasingha Tato Jato Jami Tato Nasingha Pahe Nasingha Ridaye Nasingha Narasingha Madhim Saranam Papade Tabakara Kamala Badinakam Adbuddha Singha Dalita Hiranyakasipu Tanubhinga Keshavadita Narahari Rupa Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jai Jagadisha Hare Jaya Nrsimhadev Nrsimhadev Jaya Nrsimhadev Jaya Bhakta Prahlad Jaya Bala Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Prabhupada, Prabhupada, Jai Prabhupada, Jai Nishnadev Bhagavan ki, Jai Srila Prabhupada ki. Hare Krishna devotee, please accept my humble homage. I want to request my uncle just passed away today. Is Bengal. Just their time is I think 7 o'clock this morning, Indian time, Bengal. Please pray for him and a safe journey. Hare Krishna. Thank you. Hare Krishna.
Yes, my grateful. All our condolence for your passing of the uncle, and we also pray that he has a safe journey back to Godhead.
Yes, thank
You
you.
are such a good devotee. I'm sure Krishna will look after him. Thank you.
Thank you, Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna. So tomorrow program, I think because the daylight saving is starting tomorrow. So Krishna Chandra Prabhu, can you just fill us in? What's the program looking like tomorrow?
Yeah, Hare Krishna, everyone. So tomorrow's class will be given in the morning by Kavi Chandra Maharaj. So Nandrash Prabhu, so are we going to follow the new time?